probably take us 4 or 5 days to get through this completely. Start with this definition, social constructionism. Has anyone seen this before, this name? Got one person? Good example of something that is socially constructed is money. Right? Money, you spend a few hours at work, sweat, effort, discomfort, and at the end, somebody hands you some green pieces of paper and you walk away happy. Right? Money is a social construction. It has value because we agree, people agree that it has value, right? That's an example of something that's socially constructed. It's brought about by people. And kind of the flip side to that would be essentialism. This is the idea that the concepts have an essential reality behind them. And that's not helpful, but maybe some examples would be so. Math, there's an essential reality behind the concepts of math, right? So 2 + 2 = 4, whether or not people are there to appreciate it, right? Gravity would be another example, right? It's not dependent on people, there's no, it operates, it comes from nature, right? Rather than something that's created by people. So some things fit squarely into social constructions, others are more clearly essentialist. And then there's a lot of things where people debate, right? Is this a social construction, or is this essentialism? And so when it comes to gender, which is what we're going to talk about, how is gender, or how would a social constructionist see gender?
Malleable.
Malleable? Right, but keep going.
Not just based on biologic presence.
Yeah. So it's flexible depending on probably your culture, your upbringing, that kind of thing, right? When you talk about malleable gender, remember it's a handle, right?
I was gonna say that it's kind of like the toys that we give our kids mold them into what they become, and we only give girls set toys and boys set toys, and that has more influence than we would like to believe, I guess.
Right, so yeah, a social constructionist would say girls prefer dolls to the extent that they do, because that's what they've been given, right? That would be social constructionist take on gender. What's an essentialist? How would an essentialist describe gender?
Genetics.
Well, it says it's from nature, so you're born with your gender, what you are, right?
Right,
You
but
can't change it.
right. So slight difference between sex and gender. So sex, usually we reserve that for the biology, and gender is kind of broader picture a little bit. So it's true that I think what you're saying is that you're sort of born with a set of traits, or is that not what you're saying?
Well, yeah, so like, you always think of women as like nurturers and whatnot, and men as like protectors. Does that make?
Yeah, no, so what you're talking about, if an essentialist would say that does not come from social constructions, but that's biological, that the differences between men and women are not necessarily due to what we've been taught, but because of biology, right? That it's not, that those differences are deeper than sometimes recognized. In college, what do you hear more of?
First one.
Do you hear more social construction or more essentialist?
Social construction. Supposed to be more open to
Yeah, so you get a lot more social constructions in college, right? You've taken a class on gender. I know there's a psychology, there's a psychology class on gender, or psychology of gender.
things. Gender inequality.
What is it called?
Gender inequality.
And inequality.
I don't know what it is.
Okay, good. So that's it, yeah. I haven't taken this class, I don't know the professor that teaches it, but almost certainly it's gonna be 98% up here, and maybe occasionally an acknowledgement that, you know, there's an essentialist, that there is some biology behind it. This is a Ferrari 488. 98% of Ferrari owners are men. Somebody come up with an essentialist description for that, or explanation, and somebody with a social constructionist. How would a social constructionist explain overwhelmingly Ferrari owners are men?
The men want to show off, and the way that society has helped them show off is by having a Ferrari.
Good. Well, what about an essentialist?
Boys like to go fast.
That's not bad. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, so the social constructionist perspective would be, you know, this is learned that boys, you know, maybe were raised with fast cars and that they, you know, internalized, you know, this preference for fast cars, that they were given as toys, you know, when young or whatever. And that, you know, that would be kind of the social constructionist perspective. The essentialist perspective would be that men are different biologically, and that there's a biological preference for perhaps to show off, perhaps to go fast, perhaps men just appreciate really sleek-looking cars. And I like Lamborghinis, but the difference between Lamborghinis and Ferraris is that Ferraris are beautiful. This isn't just fast, it's beautiful. Am I wrong? No, it is. I mean, if I were to look long enough, I would get tears in my eyes. All right, so that's social constructionist and essentialist. We're gonna cover a lot of ground as far as sex and gender. We're gonna start by a kind of pretty cool set of studies that looked at what happens when gender ratios get out of balance. Kind of started off the study by observing two towns in Georgia, or cities, I guess, that were similar, Mason and Columbus. This similar population, this Mason has 97% higher consumer debt, which is an average of $3,479 higher in Mason as compared to Columbus. What does this have to do with gender? So, more men here. This is a male rich environment. This is a female rich environment. So, you know, cities, for whatever reasons, naturally, sometimes the gender balance isn't exactly 50-50. And so, in places, so this is one thing that these researchers found was these two cities. So they decided to expand it and look at a bunch of cities to see if this was just a weird exception or if there was a broader pattern, right? Is this part of a broader pattern? So they looked at 134 cities, and what they found is that when there are more men than women, ratio-wise, right? Controlling for the total number of people there, but ratio-wise, men on average have more credit cards, and on average carry more debt. So what is that, what would an essentialist, well, let's start with social constructions. How would, maybe we don't even need to go there. So there's a correlation between debt and gender ratios. So we'll say lots of men and lots of debt. And there's a correlation here. And kind of the suggestion is that, that this ratio causes this. Right? That's kind of the direction we're going. What's another way to understand this? So there's a correlation between indebtedness and gender ratios that are skewed towards more males.
I feel like it's kind of conservative, but there's like this social idea that men are the ones that spend more money, for example, when you buy a house, or like they're the ones, I don't know, maybe that's why they make more debt, because they're the ones who buy the big stuff, even with a date, here they're the ones who pay.
Like their names are the ones that are on it.
Yeah.
Right. So what you're saying is right, but you're one step ahead, right? So you're going to why. What I want right now is to talk about what's a different way to understand this. So on the one hand, we could say when gender ratios favor men become more indebted. What's a different way to look at this?
They're more in debt than women.
What's that?
They're more in debt than women.
They're more in debt men than women. That's probably true.
Maybe cities with more debt attract men.
Yeah, so that would be the other way, would be to go the other direction, right? And then, if you recall, we talked about kind of two main ways. One is the opposite of, is the reverse causation, right? And then the other one is the third factor, right? Which is, maybe there are cities that, maybe let's say cities that have a lot of tech industry that attracts a certain kind of person, right? And that would account for both of these, right? So that first study is correlational, and so what we want to do is find out if there's a causal relationship, if one of these things causes the other. So they did a second study to look at this. And we've talked about temporal discounting. This is just, at some point, well, temporal discounting, as you know, it's a preference for immediate gains at a long-term cost, and they use that in the study. I'll talk about what they did in a second. But so people in this study saw lots of pictures, and the pictures were either biased towards a lot of males relative to females. I don't know if you can see this. This is lots of dudes. So the idea is to kind of temporarily create the sense of being in a situation where either there are lots of men relative to women or lots of women relative to men. And they were asked, would you rather have $64 today or $65 in 33 days? Who would take the $64 today? Right, probably most of us. Lots of different options, all the way down to $9 now versus $60 in 33 days. Who would take the $9 now? Probably nobody. Yeah, that's good. So with lots of places, lots of scores in between. The question is, how would seeing skewed gender ratios affect people's preferences here? So this is women. At the low end, this is kind of delayed gratification. This is more temporal discounting. So the difference here, it's lowest for women, or that the least likely to temporally discount in the neutral condition, but these are all really pretty close to each other. Here's the results for the male participant. So who should we hear from? Magdalena.
So, the man, they always take you later.
What's that?
The man, they always take you later, no?
So this is all men. These are all men over here. And
They take the higher amount later, is that right?
So, well, it depends on what they've seen, right? So if they saw pictures,
Your graphs, they're complicated, take me hours to read it sometimes.
well, that's all right, that's what you pay me to do.
Okay, good.
So when the men saw pictures like the one I showed you with lots and lots of dudes, they wanted the money right now. So they were, $9 now versus $60 in 33 days. Their preference was for $9 now. Maybe not that extreme, but their preferences skewed in the direction of wanting money right now, right? Compared to when they saw really anything. So all of these are kind of down in the same level. It's men seen in an environment where there are lots of other men that spiked their desire for the money right now. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's the other way around, take money now, okay, gotcha.
I'll have you explain the next one.
Oh, cool. I'm waiting.
That's a great response. I said why? Why do we think when men see an environment with lots of other men that they want to look like them, Roberto?
Because like evolutionarily speaking, the men have more resources, have a better advantage. So when men are perceived to be in a group with a ton of other men, competition is higher, therefore I need money now to compete with these men.
That is a great explanation. And that's typically, that's a very essentialist also, right? That's an essentialist explanation. And it's about competition, right? And that makes sense. When men perceive an environment that is competitive, they want to stand out. Is there a hand over there?
I was just gonna say, I tend to focus on the opposite results, because when I think, if I was to see a picture of a woman, I would think I'm gonna need a lot more money, because it's gonna cost me a lot more almost, or like, I don't know, if I was to go out with a bunch of guys, I feel like I wouldn't need that much money, I'd just take a couple bucks now and still hit a McDonald's, but if I'm seeing like picture, thinking of women, thinking a lot classier, I'm gonna take them for dinner, spend a lot more money. Does that make sense? Like, you're focusing on men, I'm thinking about, as a man, focusing on a woman, why I would want the money.
So it's not, so think of it more as this way, it's, you go to a party and there's 15 dudes and 3 ladies versus 15 ladies and 3 dudes. And the idea is you're gonna be more competitive in the environment with 15 dudes and 3 ladies, right? Than the inverse. This whole thing is kind of heavily contingent on heterosexuality, and nobody, I understand not everybody is. And we'll talk about homosexuality if we get time. But we'll want to talk about this next study, study 3. So what they did was they had people read a fake newspaper story. Fewer women for every man today, or fewer men for every woman today. Begin to kind of recreate the sense of being outnumbered, either to your advantage or disadvantage. Then people answered a bunch of questions. After spending your paycheck on various expenses, you can borrow money, charge on credit card, where you would plan to pay the money back later. How much money would you become comfortable borrowing? So it's kind of a long scenario, but it's a scenario about you getting a job after college, and you're going to have this kind of income. How much do you want to put on your credit card each month that you would hopefully be able to pay off down the road, versus how much would you want to save each month? But again, keep in mind before reading this, before doing that part, people read those stories about those fake newspaper stories about gender ratios, right? So here we are with the women. What effect did it have on women as far as so this is monthly borrowing. What effect did it, Magdalena, what effect did it have?
I'm still struggling with the sentence before. It relates to the sentence before with your blah blah blah, right? No?
Yeah, okay, so, so these are women, and then these are the women who read a newspaper story that said that there are lots of men for every woman, and this is the story that said there's lots of women for every man, right? And so, and then this is how much do they want to spend?
So, if I got you right, so when they know there are lots of women, so it's highly competitive, and they need a lot of money maybe?
Yes.
Versus the other way around, there are not too many women, so it's not too competitive, and they need less money.
Right, so this is what we would consider a competitive environment for women, less competitive. And you can see those differences are less than, less than staggering, pretty small. For men, so this is a competitive environment for men, non-competitive environment for men.
They really don't care about money, no one's not competitive.
So when do they want to spend money now? They're gonna borrow money, they've got a job, but they're gonna borrow money to spend now.
When there's more men.
When there's what?
More men.
When there's more men, right? When they're in an environment that they would consider competitive, right? That's what prompts them to want to spend a little bit more. Savings for the future, women again, not really moved one way or the other. And men, you get, right, so you get a preference for spending now and a disinclination to save.
Guys get a lot more lazy when there's no competition.
So that's a third study, and this kind of fits with this narrative, right, of competition, that men want money now to demonstrate, to stand out. So they did the newspaper thing again, and then they just looked at men, because at this point it's pretty clear who responds to gender ratios, right? It seems like men are more attuned to that. How much would you spend on an engagement ring, romantic dinner, Valentine's Day gift? What effect would gender ratios have on these?
Skyrocket.
What's that?
The should go up, like especially the engagement ring, because you have to mark your territory
It should go up
when there's more men.
right?
Because you have to make sure that your fiance is labeled that she's taken.
So here's spending on engagement rings higher, right? When men think that there's, that it's a competitive environment. Entree, how much you spend on dinner, how much you'd spend on a Valentine's Day gift. These differences aren't whopping, but it fits with, there's 3 studies where we've seen the same thing, which is when men think they're in an environment that's competitive romantically, that shifts their thinking to want to spend now. So you think about that from kind of social constructionist perspective, which is this is just what men have been taught. Essentialist would be that there is, and Alberta kind of alluded to this, this is the idea that there's some kind of biological competition that men are attuned to. Oh yeah, this is new, I just found this study. So Blackjack study, it did this, so Blackjack, they did this with male participants, and they observed their betting patterns. What they found is that when they had a female collaborator nearby, what effect would that have on their riskier or less risky?
More risky.
They were more risky, right? They were trying to kind of like gain attention. I can't be sure that it was Scarlett Johansson. But the idea is, so just the presence of a female made them kind of shift towards a higher risk.
That does make sense for me, but on the other hand, with the tables or graphs that we just looked at, I thought it would be more risky when there's guys there because they want to show off. Look how much money I'm throwing.
So the way they did the study was either there was a female or there was nobody. So it was, there's actually a second part of the study, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it was, in this case, it was either there was a female present or not. And when there was a female present, and they just did one guy at a time,
You want to impress her.
they did, right? And so they played they played a riskier style. The idea, it kind of fits with what we're talking about, which is trying to signal something, right? That they've got money. So this is kind of one explanation for why. I mean, this fits with the essentialist perspective, which is this is kind of a mouthful, but it's probably the best way to say it. The offspring of women who were attracted to men with resources survived more often than the offspring of women who were attracted to men without resources. Right? That's the essentialist perspective, which is it makes sense for men to display resources because women are attracted to resources. The reason women are attracted to resources is that early human men who did not have resources, that was a bad bet for your genes. Right? Your genes would have been less likely to be passed on if the male had, and we live in a time now where we have an abundance of resources and children, rarely starve to death. But that's not the life that our ancestors enjoyed. Of course, they didn't really enjoy life. So the idea of this competition, that you want to spend more in a competitive environment, is that we'll use this term a lot. It's signaling. What you're trying to do is signal that you are desirable, and in particular, to be more kind of nerdy about it, that that your genes are a safe bet for someone else's genes. Now, this is obviously not something that we think about consciously. This works with who's single here? Single dude? Got Tim in the back. Tim will be perfect for this. So I'm going to set Tim up with somebody, and he can choose Lady A has a lot of fine qualities. Whatever. Let's just cut to the punch. One's 25, one's 65. Who are you going to take? It's a good bet. Good bet. Why?
I think I will feel more attracted.
Okay.
Shallow.
Let's all judge Tim now. But why? And why is a 25-year-old more attractive?
We have more in common. Hopefully.
That's probably true. That's probably true too. What happened to early human men who were attracted to women in their mid to late 60s?
They had no kids.
They had no kids.
Or one kid.
Right, unlikely, just less likely to have kids. The reason people are attracted to younger women is because that's a strategy that worked for our early human ancestors. Right, being attracted to women who were infertile is not a good strategy, and so those genes didn't survive. So the same thing goes for resources. It's not necessarily a deliberate decision to be attracted to men with resources. In the same way, it's not a deliberate decision to be attracted to women who are younger than birth.
The whole attraction to potential mates with better resources vary based on environment. Like in college, per se, the person who's getting straight A's is probably eventually going to be successful, hopefully, we think, in college. Would women be more inclined to be attracted to men who will eventually come into success, theoretically?
Yeah, so that's kind of a proxy for it. Yeah, so when you talk about college students and everybody is kind of equally poor, A promise of a more promising career is kind of.
Just say you're pre-med. and you're good.
Yeah, pre-med is a more promising date than theology. Say theology because you don't have that here. All right, so SU is 57% female, so what should this mean for the cheapness or uncheapness of men here?
Cheap.
Yeah, this should cheap the dudes out here. Ladies, is this true?
Thanks.
All right, so we're talking about kind of on the men's side, men signaling desirability in a competitive environment by being attracted to gathering resources. What? Need to pause for 1 second and find some different slides. These are out of order. Here we go. All right. So next study is, I think they did this with both men and women. Wow, this is taking a little longer than I thought. Is Tony any good jokes?
You got a big green ball in the left hand and a big green ball in the right hand. What you got?
What?
Jolly Green Giants undivided attention.
All right. So in this study, people are asked, start with the ladies, with whom would you want to, so they're shown 3 attractive fellas, and they pick who they want to go on a date with. Tyra, who would you pick, just out of curiosity?
I don't know. This one,
Far left?
yeah.
Yeah, me too. Guys, does anyone disagree?
I wouldn't go. I think they're very.
I don't think anyone would
I
attractive.
You have to choose
I think
one,
they
though.
really
Choose
like
one.
themselves maybe a lot. There's no place for me.
All right.
So you gotta
They look very easy.
Well, so regardless, you pick one that you find attractive. You describe your ideal date with them, and the dudes do the same thing. Pick 3 different ladies,
Why did you put
and you describe your ideal date with them. And this is to kind of temporarily activate a romantic mindset, right? And then the third condition, neutral, they didn't describe any dates, they just wrote an essay. So they asked, how much would you ideally spend on a new car, a new watch, and a new cell phone, a couple other things? And also, how much would you volunteer for an underprivileged youth center, children's hospital, and homeless shelter? And what do you think, we'll just start with, what do you think the results will be?
Is it after showing the pictures of their?
So you see the pictures, then you pick one, and then you write your ideal date with that person. And the idea is that you're thinking in a romantic mindset. Then you take the second study that is supposedly unrelated, but obviously we think there's gonna be a link. And so you're asked about how much you'd spend in terms of money, and then also in terms of time. So let's start with men. What do you think men will?
Probably spend more on all of it.
You think men spend more up here? What about down here?
Maybe down there as well, yeah. Be more aggressive in the sense
I think it
of-
would be less down there.
Yeah.
Less down here? What about the ladies? Other way around, what do you mean?
oh, I thought maybe they'd spend less on the top, like the car watch and cell phone, and more for the volunteering.
All right, so let's look at the results. Neutral condition, men just kind of have a general preference slightly for spending more on, was it phones, cars, watches? But when men have that romantic mindset, right, and all they did was just look at a picture, describe an ideal date, and they did this, and their preferences for spending. So it's not just that men want to spend more, it's specific to when they are, when they have romantic motives activated. I don't want to say turned on or horny, because that's crass, so I'll keep going back to romantic motives are activated, or romantic mindset.
We know what you mean.
But you know what I mean. All right, so the ladies, or the benevolence, men and women, in general, just a little better at being people than men are. So there's a difference here. But then, this is exactly as Amelie predicted, right? So if we kind of keep with the essentialist perspective, how do we understand this?
Men are shallow. Women are nice.
So when it comes to mating, women have to commit way more time when it comes to things, because like having a baby for 9 months, whereas men just have to contribute their part, and they can go if they want to, not socially acceptably, but but when it comes to mating for men, they don't have to have that mentality, they just have to have the mentality of getting there, essentially.
So what you're talking about parental investment, and we'll spend some time on that a little bit too. But think about what's being signaled.
That women are caring and men have the resources.
Yeah. So why should it matter? Why should it matter if women are caring or not?
Because kids are hard, and we want women that are going to be nice to our kids. And
Yeah.
take care of them and make them survive.
Yeah.
And then our resources help the kids survive.
Yeah, so it's and to be a little more cynical about it, it's that your genes want to be well cared for, right? That's why women signal nurturing when they're in the sort of romantic mindset, right? Because what that signals is this is a safe place for your genes, right? In the same way, from the men's perspective, showing wealth, having a fancy watch or whatever, signals the other side, which is these are resources, and therefore my genes are a safe place.
Have they done a study that divides like single men versus married, and does it still have the same effect?
When you get married, you're married.
Yeah.
You lose testosterone, like it's empirically shown.
Yeah.
So you get a weaker effect.
So you're not as competitive
Yeah.
versus the single guy.
Yeah, and also, and the other part of it is when you're married, you oftentimes you have your own genes living under your roof, and so that becomes sort of more your focus rather than sort of setting up new franchises. Take care of the one. All right, so second study read a highly romantic scenario. I don't remember what they said, but highly romantic. Then list characteristics you would desire in ideal mate. Then they ask everybody how much would you spend on a car, on a watch, on a cell phone, on headache medicine, cleaning products, a bunch of other stuff. What's the difference between conspicuous and inconspicuous? What's the difference between those kinds of, what does that mean, conspicuous?
Obvious.
Yeah, readily observed. So these are things that you can readily observe. These are things that you are not necessarily able to see readily. Conspicuous helping out underprivileged youth. children's hospital volunteering, that kind of way, that's something that other people can see. Inconspicuous is picking up litter alone, taking shorter showers, anonymous acts of kindness. If this is about signaling, where would we see the effects? In the conspicuous things, right? Inconspicuous, that doesn't, if it's really about signaling to potentially other mates, then it should be mostly about conspicuous. So for men, conspicuous purchases is exactly what you'd expect. For inconspicuous purchases, so it was like headache medicine, whatever, household cleaning products, that kind of stuff, it actually makes men less, right? Likely, they want to spend less when they're in the mating mindset. So it's pretty clear for men, it's very definitely about signaling, right? It's about the display.
Peacocking.
Peacocking, yes. And so for women, again, we talked about this, women are better at being people, and so neutral condition, right, women just sort of more willing to volunteer inconspicuously, but conspicuously, when they're in that mating mindset, much more willing to spend time. So men want to spend money to signal their desirability as a mate. Women tend to prefer signaling benevolence when they're in the mating mindset. So how are men and women similar in how a romantic motivation affects them, and how are they different? Kind of said this, but.
They're similar in that they still want to show what they have to offer and want to show the other person that they're the right mating partner.
Right on. And they're different in just in sort of in
what
what.
they are showing.
Yeah, exactly. So this next. Yeah. Well, so the idea is that you kind of approximate what happens outside the lab. Any guesses to the gender of the owner?
Male.
It's right. Obviously, I have no idea. I don't know the owner of this. I just Google image. But there's no chance. I mean, this is a male who drives this, right? Because it's all about attracting attention. It's all about look at me and my resources. Last study. I think we can get through this one. Same thing. Women choose somebody they want to go on a date with. Dudes do the same thing. So you get the romantic mindset activated. And then they ask people for financial donations. How much would you donate to natural disaster victims? Give an extra large tip, help poor families. And so who thinks women would respond to this, and who thinks men would respond to this? Who's gonna, so this is financial, but it's also benevolent, so who's gonna respond to this? Both, right? For the same reason or for different reasons? It's the same, yeah, so you can see women in general prefer giving more without romantic motives activated, but then both men and women increase dramatically what they would want to give, but for different reasons, right? So men are signaling the resources that they've got the money to do it. Women are signaling generosity and benevolence. So we'll stop there. We'll pick up here next time.